All of us in our behaviors are shaped and influenced by television. If you are alive and able to watch this recording right now, you in your behaviors and expectations have been shaped by television. I would even say if you were that one kid in the school who had hippie parents or had religious fundamentalist parents where your parents didn't let you watch television, you're still shaped by it because all of your classmates who surrounded you and all of your teachers and all of the adults in life, they all grew up watching television and they all communicated that stuff to you. I think for years before I saw the movie Wayne's World, I'd heard every joke out of Wayne's World on the schoolyard. You know what I mean? Like just other people at school. A lot of those things, they get communicated to you. It wasn't so much a problem for me, but I remember one of my gym teachers, actually, it was the gym teacher, complaining that kids would come in all hopped up off of watching Saturday Night Live, the TV show Saturday Night Live. It had a few golden years. It was really popular with children, frankly, and teenagers. And they'd all be repeating the jokes out of Saturday Night Live. And he would say he could tell, because he was a gym coach, the kids who couldn't really work out, who couldn't really exercise and stuff, on the Monday or whatever. It's like, well, they've been up all night. They haven't been sleeping probably. They've been up till 2 a.m. or something watching this stupid TV show. Okay. A lot of us, to an extent, we maybe can never fully be aware of, right? Our expectations are shaped by television. If you help people, if you try to help people, the vast majority of them don't want to be helped. You don't see that on television. Talked to a woman who told me her dream was to get involved with humanitarian work in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, basically rescuing prostitutes from their pimp. Now, I know a lot about that line of work. This woman I was talking to, just being real with you, she knows nothing about it. She comes out of a Catholic religious background, and she thinks she's going to be Batman. She thinks she's going to swing in on a rope. There's going to be a good guy and a bad guy, and like she's going to punch out the bad guy and rescue the good guy. And, because I'd done research on this and I'd talked to people connected to this, this industry at different stages, I say to her, have you considered the possibility that when you punch out the pimp, the prostitute screams at you, weeps, runs over and hugs and takes care of the pimp? Like, have you considered the possibility that the pimp has been her boyfriend since high school and that's her best friend? If you consider the possibility that this is a woman who hates her parents and who quite consciously and intentionally ran away with her boyfriend or her pimp, that's the man she shares an apartment with. That's the man her life revolves around, right? That's the man she runs to for comfort and support when she's weeping or screaming, and you've just punched him out because you think you're Batman and he's the Joker or something, right? Like, what makes you assume that this prostitute wants to escape? What makes you think she wants the help you're offering, the compassion you're offering, right? Again, Southeast Asia, we're talking about here, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. There are a lot of these women who will say to you straight to your face, their parents were rice farmers, their grandparents were rice farmers. They don't want to go back to the farm. These women will say to you, in their first month working as a prostitute, they earn more money than their father made as a year. They made more money than their father made in a year as a rice farmer. They don't want to go back to that. They don't want your help. They didn't ask you to come here and screw up their whole business, their whole situation. And they may have a plan. They may have money stacked up to retire, or very commonly to open a shop or something. They want to open a restaurant or something, want to open a hotel. Once they've stacked up enough paper, they may have their whole life together. And you think you're rescuing them. And then here's the other thing. If they were trying to escape, right? If they did want the particular help you're trying to offer, if they did want someone to punch out their pimp and offer them a way out, right? What would they have already done before you, the supposed hero, got on the scene, right? Most people you offer advice to, even the best advice, they don't want that advice, right? Most people Most people you want to help. Most people you're trying to help, they don't want the help. And because we're raised with television, with comic books, with these notions of heroism, notions of what helping means and so on, most of us don't want to stop and reflect on what the help is we're offering, of what value that really be to other people. Now, I'm going to talk about how I, with my years of accumulated foolishness and wisdom, actually try to help people who are going through some kind of tragedy, going through some kind of heartbreak in their lives. And I'm starting by saying I completely believe that I am helping. I completely believe this is the advice people need to hear, but it's not what they want to hear, and it's not what they expect to hear. Most people in our culture, in our generation, our time, will respond to you saying that you feel bad by saying, "Oh, you need to feel good." So like this goes back centuries. Like, you're crying at a funeral? Oh, get drunk, drink alcohol. This whole culture of getting drunk at funerals. Oh, you feel bad about yourself? Drink alcohol to feel good. And it's the same bullshit. It's the same kind of self-medication strategy with taking prescription drugs like antidepressants, SSRIs, Prozac. You know what I mean? Like, oh, your problem is you feel bad. So we're not going to talk about solving the problem. We're not going to talk about how to change your life or whatever. We're not even going to talk about this person's death. We're just going to talk about how you can feel good, where what you're problematizing is the feeling. And the solution, sadly, is some kind of distraction, right? Like alcohol at best is a distraction. It's not going to bring your dead husband back to life. You know what I mean? It's not going to actually solve the problem. It's not even going to help you think about or reflect on or gain some detachment on or an analytical perspective on the problem. That's what most people are used to. That's what most people are expecting. And that's not my approach at all. You know, what I say to people who are going through some kind of tragedy or some kind of heartbreak is, you need to have something more meaningful in your life. You need to have something so much more meaningful that it eclipses this heartbreak. It eclipses this tragedy. It's so much greater in scale and intensity, right? In the same way that the sun is greater than the moon. Okay, all right, I've got that the wrong way around. I guess it depends which type of eclipse we're talking about here. Solar eclipse or lunar eclipse. All right. Mixed metaphor. You have to have something so much more meaningful in your life that this tragedy you're struggling with, it seems like a footnote. Seems very trivial indeed. And sometimes I talk to people. This works with young people, works with old people also. Like, let's just say they're going through a divorce. Let's just say, a man finds out that his wife has been cheating on him, and now they're going to have divorce. So he's at that moment, he's really heartbroken and so on, But could be anything. It could be a professional disappointment. It could be you're enrolled in a university program and you find out that's going to be impossible for you to proceed with all your career plans, everything you assumed based on that university program. It's not going to work out. Whether that's your own fault or it's no fault of your own, you have that kind of crushing disappointment. Someone in that position, they've probably already told their parents. They may have already told their best friend or something before they told you. They told a number of people. Probably every single one of those people said, "Oh, you poor dear, you feel sad. You should feel happy. Like, oh, you should drink alcohol, or you should go to Disneyland, or you should get a massage. Like, you should do something to feel happy. You should do something to feel good about yourself." And that's not what I'm saying to these people at all, right? I'm saying you should take on work and responsibilities so meaningful, right? Of such intensity, of such scale, of such importance, that it makes this tragedy in your life seem like no big deal. And I'm often saying to them, again, whether they're young or old, try to imagine yourself just 5 years from now. So if you're 25, think about when you're 30 years old and looking back on this. What are you going to think? What are you going to feel? Like, yeah, your girlfriend cheated on you, like, you're going to be a guy in your 30s looking like, yeah, you once had a girlfriend that cheated on you. So what? It's going to be like a funny story to tell. It's going to be something you look back on and probably laugh about just 5 years from now, not even 10 years. Like right now, you're so close to this. This seems like an overwhelming tragedy. It seems something you can't handle, right? But just 5 years from now, when you look back on it, how are you going to calibrate this, right? So again, it's an overused simile in English, but like think about what we mean when we say to somebody, see it, try to see it in perspective. Okay? When you see something in perspective, you distinguish between something that's large, something that's actually enormous in scale, as opposed to something that's just close up to you, right? When you don't have any perspective, you can't tell the difference between something that's huge and something you just happen to be too close to. Like a tree is up close to your face, but if it were further away on the horizon, you judge its size differently, given your sense of perspective. I'm going to give you a real quick, plausible example. And again, nobody wants to hear this. Like, I completely accept. Like, I think my advice is good. I think it's sound. I think it's helping people. But I also totally understand. In our culture, in our time, this is not what anyone wants to hear. So let's say I've got this friend, and he's completely heartbroken. He's going through some kind of personal tragedy, this guy. And I say, look, I have a research project I can bring you in on. We're going to do a survey of the literature on cancer research. We're going to go through thousands of articles on, the cure for cancer, so to speak. And what we're going to do is we're going to write an article about what hasn't been researched yet, the areas of research that have been neglected, the gaps in the research that's already going on. And we're going to go through and compile every single paper that said, we don't know this. Here's something we don't know. Here's something we don't understand. Further research is needed. And then we're going to investigate and see if that further research was ever done. And if it wasn't done, our essay, our survey, our analysis, it's going to highlight that. Now, I'm giving you so much detail of this because it would be a bit too vague if I just said, oh, yeah, let's find the cure for cancer. Well, what does that really mean? Okay, I'm not talking about something so intangible and far off and distant and removed by decades or centuries as finding the cure for cancer. This is a research project, and we're going to wrap it up in less than a year, and then we're going to publish it. And it's going to be really meaningful, and we're going to go out and promote it and say, hey, guys, we did this analysis of what is the research that isn't being done. What are the gaps in the current research effort, worldwide? What needs to happen next for cancer research? And you can be a part of that project. I want you to be a part of something. I want you to take on responsibility for something, right? So enormous, so meaningful, so rewarding, and something you're engaged with so intensely that now this tragedy in your life, whatever it is, you see it in a different perspective. And I think a great deal of the brittleness of middle-aged people in our society, in our culture, is that they still live like teenagers, where they have nothing meaningful in their lives, and they never have had anything meaningful in life. It's not even like they were committed to something in the past, and now they've lost it. They never developed those muscles in the first place. And, look, I'm talking about middle-aged people. You probably have known some teenagers like this, whether it's your cousin or somebody, your little sister, somebody you were related to. Like, you've probably known a teenager who's so upset and so furious because she had a crush on a guy and she went on 2 dates with him. And then he said on Twitter or he said on Instagram that she's just a dumb bitch anyway, and he doesn't ever want to talk to her again. Like some real teenage stuff like this. And she is bereaved and she is weeping and she's not going to school anymore. She misses a week of class and she's for a lot of teenagers, these kinds of things. I mean, middle-aged person, they kind of shrug and they have whatever kind of detached attitude. If you haven't really been around teenagers, you may have forgotten, just how deeply these things cut them. And it's easy to say, think about the kind of coping strategy in our culture. It's because of hormones. It's because they're immature. We have all these ways to deflect it, right? Well, again, something you could say to these teenagers, how do you think you're going to look back on this 5 years from now? But they can't imagine that yet. When you're 30, you know what it's like, the difference between something at 25 and 30, and now you can think about the difference between 30 and 35, what kind of detached perspective you have. Okay, but if you're talking to someone who's 15, they only know the difference between 10 and 15. But you can try to think about the things that really upset you when you were 10 years old and how you look back on them now. You can try to talk them through that, try to get them to think that way. But that's probably not going to work. And the reality is they have never had something in their life like finding the cure for cancer, something they're really committed to, that's really rewarding, that puts these other things in perspective, right? Because it's not nothing. It's not trivial. You're not upset for no reason. And you're not going to solve the problem by doing something to make yourself feel good. You're not, and I think some parents would. I think I've known parents who sit down and drink whiskey with their kid. Oh, come on, let's have a drink. Let's feel better about it. Drink whiskey. Let's watch a movie together. Or let's go skiing or something. Do something they consider fun, distract. Let's do something. It'll take your mind off it. Think about that. It'll take your mind off it, right? And this is like the diametric opposite of the advice I'm giving. It's like, no. You don't need to take your mind off it. You don't need to feel good. You don't need to counteract feeling sad by feeling happy. You need to pour your energy into something that's really challenging, really meaningful, and really rewarding. And this is the insulting part. This is why people don't want to hear this. On some level, anyone who hears this advice will know that if they had something this meaningful in their life, they never would have been so upset about this tragedy in the first place, right? And guys, so like Melissa was with me when my father died. Okay, I'm just being real. I don't think I cried once. I don't think I was upset once. I remember when my grandmother died too, right? But like, you think you're the only person whose father died? Like, you think this is new? Like, there are two types of people in the world. There are people who live long enough to see their father die, and there are people who die tragically young, and then their father has to bury them. These are the two fucking options. Which do you prefer? Like, we all know sooner or later our father's going to die. We all know we're going to go through, right? Like, what do you want me to do? You want me to act like this is some kind of tragedy I can't handle? And look, guys, I do criticize myself on this. The problem with my strategy is that when you have something in your life that's so meaningful, like you're researching the cure for cancer, right? Then when you're separated from that, then you really cry. Then you really have an experience of, profound sorrow, because that was what you were putting all of your time and talent and energy into, right? And that example alone may stand. But I mean, you guys know, just to give an example, I committed to learning the Cree language. It's a First Nations language, an American Indian language, whatever. Obviously I can give a whole bunch of examples here, but I have this whole plan for what I'm doing with the next 10 years of my life. And I care so much about the politics, and I care so much about helping these people, because no offense, in Canadian politics, it's really a kind of altruistic humanitarian thing to do. It is self-sacrificing to go into Cree and Ojibwe rather than Greek or Latin or any other language that's going to be more rewarded in every other way. But it's like, well, this is my country, and this is my country's history of genocide, and this is the political policy crisis we're facing now, and these people need the help, and who's going to do it? So you have a sense of mission and purpose. It's meaningful, it's rewarding, and then it's taken away from you. Okay, so that's then tremendous sorrow, and how are you going to cope with it? And I'm just being real with you. This is part of my tradition. I cope the same way. I pour myself into something else that's meaningful and rewarding and enormous and intense, so on and so forth. So I'm going to read you this, and let's remember again, guys, it's not perfect. It's not, okay? It's horrible. It's terrible. And I've done my share of weeping, right? But the tragedies in my life, right? Like I calibrate them in this sense. Whatever. You have a crush on someone and they don't have a crush on you back. Like I get it. That's devastating. I remember I got a detailed account from this guy. His younger sister was going to go on a date, and she had one zit. She got acne right there on her chin. She got one zit, and she was weeping and screaming, and she refused to look in the mirror without putting a Band-Aid, a full set over her chin, right? And I think she was 16, from memory. And he and his mom, like, they spent like hours like trying to console her and talk, like, look, it's one zit. They said whatever they said to her, right? But that's, whatever. She was a vain, pretty teenage girl, and she has never thought in this long-term way. She doesn't have anything else in her life, and it's just devastating for her to look in the mirror and think she's ugly, think there's a problem with her face. She's totally, torn up about it. And I'm sorry, but most of the tragedies you experience in your life, just 5 years later, they're going to seem that ridiculous to you. Like what? So sorry, when she goes from 16 to 21, that's probably become a funny story she tells to a friend now. Like, oh yeah, I remember the first time I had a zit before going on a date with this guy. And, probably she and her mom will look back and joke about it 5 years later. Remember that time you were screaming and weeping and you refused to go outside the house if you didn't have a Band-Aid over your chin, And now think about the things you've been through in life, right? But look, what I'm suggesting here, it's not perfect. All right. I do have to deal with my own heartbreak, with my own tragedy in life. And, you can't compare it to perfection. You have to compare it to the coping strategies that are actually dominant in our culture and society right now, which is people drinking whiskey. All right. So I'm gonna read this email. It's the reason for the title and description of this video. I got this detailed account from a police officer just over the radio here. Did this radio show and they interviewed a series of police officers. I think they were all diagnosed with something like PTSD. They were police officers who'd gone for psychiatric help after cracking up. And it was a female police officer, and she had a case that involved, this is a long story short, obviously, she saw a dead baby. All right, there was a dead infant. And the same night it happened, she went home to her apartment with her husband, and she was weeping and shaken up. And her husband responded to this. I guess he's a loving husband. He canceled everything he was doing. He got out a bottle of whiskey, sat down with her at the table, face to face, and they drank the whole bottle of whiskey together as she was weeping and shaking and blubbering about how disturbed she was to see this baby. I don't think that's the last bottle of whiskey they drank. And surprise, didn't solve the problem. She ends up in a psych ward. She ends up not being able to do her job. She ends up not coping or not recovering at all. Like, dude, I get it. Sorry, this issue specifically, like the link between death and alcohol. I was thinking about this the other day for very different reasons. I'm studying Laotian again. Now I'm studying the Laotian language. And I remember a guy, he was genuinely a tough guy. And he'd been in and out of prison in the United States. He'd done a prison sentence in the United States. So he dealt with all kinds of tough situations in his life. He was very proud to say that he had never been a gang member. He had, from my perspective, he'd been a career criminal, but he worked alone. And he was proud of that. He had relatives who were members of gangs. He was like, no, he never signed up to a gang. He worked as an independent gangster, a freelance criminal, But he'd really been a tough guy. So this is an American. He goes to Cambodia. He watches this woman die. And again, for Americans, this is very disturbing in different ways. In a country like Cambodia, somebody dies, nobody calls the ambulance. Nobody, there's no government. They just start preparing the body for funeral, and a lot of these Buddhist families, you take the body, you roll it up, and for a lot of Americans, it's very disturbing. It looks like a barbecue. I'm vegan, but it doesn't look that different from taking a cow or a pig and putting it on a barbecue. You take a human body and you put it on a pile of wooden sticks that you light on fire. It depends. There's more than one way to have a Buddhist funeral. But like third world conditions in a Buddhist country in Cambodia, there's no paperwork to fill out for the government. Like, they're dead. Roll them up and put them on a funeral pile. Anyway, so this is an American guy, and he was a tough guy, but he was so shaken up by watching this woman die. And everyone else, all the Cambodians around there, were completely cool with it. They all had detached Buddhist attitudes. They're all people who grew up with this doctrine. All is impermanent. Life is suffering. Death's gonna. They were expecting death to come for them, and so on. They've probably done it before. They've probably dealt with relatives dying in this way. And it's very taboo in that culture to drink alcohol in that context. Different cultures are different that way. Like when you can and can't drink alcohol. You're not supposed to drink alcohol in Cambodia when death and funerals and things are involved. And this American guy, he slinks away and he gets himself a bottle of whiskey. And he's trying to, without offending anyone, get drunk because nobody else is drinking. This is Cambodian culture. I don't know any other culture in the world where people would do this to you. A Cambodian guy who speaks some English walks up to him and says in broken English, you drink alcohol. You coward. You afraid to die, afraid of death. That's why you drink alcohol. I got this story from the American guy. He said this Cambodian guy just stood there and denounced him. It wasn't for a short time. They weren't busy. They're standing around. And, and like, obviously at first other people weren't paying attention, but then the other people come over and they're like, yeah, that's true. He's a coward. He's getting drunk because he's afraid of death. Like, other people are like, yeah, good point. Like, yeah, that's true. So he feels even more ashamed and humiliated. I'm not going to digress into that, but like, if you're used to Japanese culture before you go to Cambodia, it's shocking how blunt the Cambodians are with you. If you're used to Thai culture, if you're used to Laotian culture, Cambodia, it's a real contrast to just the adjacent or surrounding cultures in Asia. I don't think anyone in China would say that to you. Even though China also, many millions of people in China are Buddhist. I don't think anyone in China would really insult you that way. I didn't put on a Cambodian accent for that story. All right, we have some questions coming into the audience. I will get to your questions in a second. If anyone has something intelligent to say, you can type it now. If anyone wants to hit the thumbs up button, you can. There are 41 people listening to this, and you're afraid to hit the thumbs up button. You are not hitting the thumbs up button because you're a coward. You're not hitting the thumbs up button because you're afraid of death, okay? You're afraid to have your name associated with horrifying advice in this video. So there's a link in the description. I left this advice on another YouTube channel, a guy called The Retro Bro. And his YouTube channel, it's been 98% about video games. Right? I would guess he's the same age I am, approximately. He's a grown man. And it's a retro video gaming channel. And he made a video where he was really down bad about the way in which the Tommy Tallarico and Intellivision controversy had ruined his channel and to some extent ruined his life. Okay. Now, you could already repeat what I've said in the first half of this video and apply it to the situation. How is that going to seem just 5 years from now when he looks back on it? You can talk some of those things through in your mind. But here is what I said to him. And again, it's not nothing. He's not upset for no reason. He's not broken down or upset for no reason. He's not. 1, you can change your YouTube channel at any time. You can delete every single video prior to this one if you want to. 2, you can change your life at any time. You can change who you are, and then your YouTube channel can reflect that. I'm studying Laotian right now, a language that not many people study. I can live stream that. I can start making friends on that basis. You can too. You can study languages, study history, study politics. You can start doing something more meaningful than video games, both on and off YouTube. And then the Intellivision debacle will seem like a minor footnote in your life. Now, again, I don't think I need to describe here what the Intellivision debacle is. It is upsetting. He was personal friends with this guy, Tommy Tallarico. Tommy Tallarico's project that this guy got involved with and roped into and was promoting. He did a podcast for it. He made all these videos where it became a big thing in his life, certainly his YouTube life and so on. And, now everyone on the internet is denouncing it as a scam. I totally understand the sense in which he's crestfallen and disillusioned and depressed and upset by that. Right? 5 years from now. And I can combine these two pieces of advice as follows. How pathetic and meaningless would your life be if 5 years from now you look back and this is still a big deal to you? And like, again, sorry, if it's your love life, and a lot of you are. I've got a friend right now. She went through divorce like 5 minutes ago. Of course it's upsetting. Of course it's horrifying. I've got male friends who are really upset and disappointed by the experiences of women. I got female friends who are really disappointed and upset by the experiences of men. But like, if you're talking to a 25-year-old and they're heartbroken about this love affair, like, well, what would you have done with your life between 25 and 30 if this is still such a big deal to you when you're 30. Like, if in those 5 years you're leading a really meaningful, really rewarding, highly motivated life, you're finding the cure for cancer, you're learning Laotian, you're studying the politics of the Cree and the Ojibwe, whatever it is you're doing, you're pouring your energy into something meaningful, right? It's not possible to think of that person living that life for those 5 years, whatever it is we want, that meaningful life, who's still going to feel overwhelmed, still going to feel he's going to feel emotionally devastated by this, looking back on it 5 years now. And now, hypothetically, let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about someone who for the next 5 years lives such a pathetic life. Like, there's no new love that comes into it. There's no new experience. There are no ambitions, no initiative, no attempt to make the world a better place, no attempt to make yourself a better person, no attempt to learn and so, right? That person after 5 years, maybe they're still overwhelmed and devastated by this thing in their life. And guys, again, I'm sorry, but I've even if your father died, everybody's father dies. The only way you cannot experience your father dying is if you die before your father, and then he's got to bury you instead, right? Like, that may seem like the most overwhelming, terrible thing in your life when you're up close to it, but it's not. And yeah, like, again, I'm not trying to misrepresent this or oversell it. That commitment to leading a meaningful life, it entails its own sorrows. It entails its own tragedies. My commitment to studying Cree and Ojibwe, my commitment to studying Pali, ancient Buddhist philosophy before that, my commitment to doing humanitarian work in Cambodia and Laos, right? Like, things I've tried to do positively, they entail their own sorrows, their own tragedies, their own disappointment. Even so, Melissa's here. Melissa and I having this plan to open a bakery, all right? May sound like a small thing to some of you, right? But actually, if you go to Cambodia and do humanitarian work, that can be short term. You can do it for 2 years, 2 years, 5. This was a plan. This is for the rest of our lives. We're going to go into baking, right? It's really a big deal. We're gonna open a vegan bakery. And a friend of mine just called me a couple days ago, asking me to go into business with him because he remembers. He was like, "Hey, look, would you be willing to own and manage a bakery as part of this larger complex he's gonna own and operate?" Okay, well, that's actually something that's going to change your life for the rest of your life. And you're going to be waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day to roll dough to make the bread. You know what I mean? This is something that's going to change every day of your life. It's a big deal. Like, even if you think it's shallow compared to finding the cure for cancer, it's a big deal for me in my life to commit to becoming a baker. And then you have the agony and the sorrow of that, the heartbreak of the disappointment of that not working out, of that proving to be impossible. In my case, impossible just because the quality of the college system here in Canada was so bad, was so terrible. So that's why we quit. It's, totally unexpected, tragic thing. So yeah, leading a meaningful life does entail sorrow. It does entail suffering, right? But it's meaningful suffering. You're miserable. You're heartbroken about something that's really worthwhile, that's really meaningful to be heartbroken about. Yeah. It's not a trivial difference, as opposed to, weeping over things that are really meaningless. And yeah, so I've given this somewhat convoluted example or allegory of talking about perspective, what's really big as opposed to what's close to you. Like, what's big, but it's far away on the horizon, and what's small, but it's so close to you. You don't have the detachment, you don't have the distance to see how big it truly is, to see how small it truly is, right? That issue. But the other thing that changes in scale is you. You become a bigger person. You become a more substantive person. You become intellectually, ethically, and emotionally more massive. To this point where finding out your father died is really not that big a deal to you. To the point where finding out your girlfriend cheated on you is really not that big a deal to you. Where not just having acne on your face is not that big a deal to you, but like, you have a car accident that really changes your face, and it's not that big a deal to you, right? And for someone else, it's totally devastating because they themselves haven't increased in size relative to these tragedies, relative to these disappointments. So we got some donations. I normally turn to Melissa and say Melissa gets the first the first crack at asking the question, but I'm going to answer the questions from Charlie first. He's donated some money to support the channel, which is a nice way to say donated some money to support me, frankly. Charlie says, quote, what is something you consider meaningful to dedicate your life to? I'll read the rest of the question one sec, but already there, I want to answer that part. Okay. So look, guys, there's what's meaningful to me. So what's meaningful to you. And then there's a separate challenge of, can you explain to your own mother that it's meaningful? Can you explain to your own grandmother that it's meaningful? Now, just brief digression into this. At one point, I was totally passionate about studying this set of languages. Language, history, culture, politics, all comes together, but the language is a lot of the work, right? In Southeast Asia. So this involves Cambodian, Laotian, Sinhalese, Burmese, right? Pali, right? And I go to see my grandmother. This is face-to-face in my grandmother's apartment. This wasn't via Skype or something, right? I go to see my grandmother, and I show her my handwriting. Like I open up and say, look, this is what I'm studying. And, to show her that, because, I'm not going to show her the textbook. I'm showing her the work I'm doing, so she gets a sense also just how many hours it is. I'm filling up pages with all this work and research. And she doesn't get it at all. She doesn't get it at all. It's completely incomprehensible to her what is meaningful or rewarding about this. But like her reaction to this is like, why would you want to study Laos or Cambodia or Sri Lanka or Myanmar? And I'll always remember this. I'm sorry, it's just very memorable. Take it to my grave. I'll take this with me to the grave. She responds to this like kind of starting and saying, well, why would you learn that instead of, say, French? Like as if it would be more rewarding for me to study French, the history of France. Now, again, I'm not saying this to heap scorn on my grandmother, right? But like this is meaningful to me. And I've had this experience. The librarian, when I go to the library to get these books, may scoff at me, may insult me. I've had that. You have librarians who are people with no level of intellectual sophistication. And they think you're a loser. Like, really? It's ridiculous, but it's true. Like your own mother, your own grandmother, right? Okay, but this is the thing. In that case, there's something tangible. I can show my grandmother what I'm doing. I can also like show her. I remember on a separate visit, I remember showing my grandmother, I brought her a series of like coffee table books, illustrated photograph filled books that showed her Laos and Cambodia. Like, look, this is the stuff I'm doing. These are the places I'm going. Like I could show her what this was, what was meaningful about it. Like in some sense, I can't really show you what's meaningful about it, but I can get your imagination rolling. I remember it was also a bizarre comment from her because some of the photographs they showed like starvation and poverty. Like they showed the social problems I was there to research and deal with. And she said, oh, well, this was her wording. I can remember the exact wording. Well, I think it's good that you chose to work with a handsome people. Like, obviously, it's possible to show photographs that are of like sexy singers or actors or something. But like, I'm like, these are pictures of people like in refugee camps and whatever, poverty conditions. So it's, and also I think I had some, I might have had some photographs of Buddhist temples or something. I was like, what? And I think she was basically saying that they were better looking than Africans. I think was what she like. Well, compared to going to Ethiopia and helping. Some attitudes are best left behind in the 1930s, people. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my grandmother. Okay, but there's something I can show her. I can say, so using Charlie's wording, this is something meaningful I'm dedicating my life to, right? Now, again, you can imagine if it were math, if it were chemistry, if it were physics, like, hey, you're doing rocket science and you show your grandmother, look, this is the type of work I do with rockets. Maybe you can't visualize, right? Your mother, your grandmother, whatever, right? The hardest thing of all is when all you've got to show is a blank piece of paper. All right. I had a night recently. So I've gotten my caffeine tolerance down to 0. I've quit caffeine many, many times. But I had gotten my caffeine tolerance down to 0. I'd quit for enough days that my caffeine was 0. And then there was one day where I went with Melissa. I had about 2 ounces of coffee. This is less than a third of a full-size cup of coffee. And then I had a whole cup of decaf. I think it was the decaf that killed me because, decaf is never really decaf. Decaf always has some caffeine. And I was awake till 6 a.m. I did that first thing in the morning, right? 9 a.m., 10 a.m., something, right? I had this coffee, a whole decaf and this much calf. I wrote the first chapter of a new book. It's a book none of you guys know about. It's not the books you know. Started working on it. I said, well, I'm awake anyway. Okay, do the first chapter. Start a new book. Okay. How do you go to your grandmother and say, yeah, here's a stack of blank paper, and I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to write a comedy that's going to change the world. That's what Voltaire did, right? And like, look, I'm not a fan of Voltaire. I'm not a fan of Walt Disney either, right? But like, you can really say people like Voltaire and people like Walt Disney, they have changed. Whether you're talking about fiction or nonfiction, to say to your mother, to say to your grandmother, and obviously, good luck, your work colleagues, or if you sleep around, you might have 3 or 4 girlfriends, but none of them love you that much. None of them respect you that much. It's not how I live my life, but you could be sleeping with people who don't really love and respect you. And you say to them, yeah. I think I've got what it takes to take this blank piece of paper and really turn it into something, whether that's fiction or nonfiction, whether that's based on research or humor or what have you, right? So my point is, in this sense, we're dealing with an easy example when you talk about dedicating yourself to something meaningful in life that already exists, whether that's Cambodia, Egypt, Laos, physics, any of these things that are tangible and visible. And the hardest thing of all is where you're dedicating yourself to something meaningful that doesn't exist yet. It's still a blank sheet of paper. It's still a blank canvas. It's still a blank chalkboard. Okay, so his next question is, for example, what advice would you have for your daughter growing up? This whole YouTube channel is my advice for my daughter growing up. Every single video, including this one, is my advice for my daughter growing up. There's no plot twist there. What do you think? You think I give my advice different? You think I'd give my daughter advice different from what I'm giving you, Charlie? Come on. Oh God. So look, for me, this is an easy question to answer. Charlie asks, what is the biggest tragedy that you've experienced in life? How did you cope with it? Do you consider death a tragedy? So I think it's already clear. I don't think death is a tragedy. But, something I say, my friends, Melissa's heard this, but friends who've known me face to face in real life all the time is, you might assume that like my divorce from my first wife is my biggest tragedy. You might assume that my separation from my daughter is the biggest tragedy in my life. But no, the biggest tragedy in my life is the Canadian education system. And that's because it's a tragedy I've never been able to disentangle myself from. The reality of university education in Canada, college education in Canada. You've already heard a bit about that in this video. The way in which that has ruined my life again and again and again. Frankly, I think you can tell I'm not upset about it, like not in this moment, but that's something I could never get away from and I could never get over. And, if you guys don't know, I looked at all the alternatives. I looked at going to university in Germany, in Taiwan, in Japan, and basically everywhere on the planet. And there was no way for me to move forward with formal education. So that is, in brief, the biggest tragedy of my life. And it's not a disappointment tragedy that happened just one time. Again and again and again over so many years with so many university programs. Yeah. So, okay. Shout out to Gen X Gamer. You're going to have to start at the beginning of this video, unfortunately. There's no way you can understand what we're talking about by joining in the middle. So Charlie also asks, quote, some vegans claim the planet would benefit with humans not being here, less pollution, etc. Do you agree? So I think I have made videos discussing this before in my critique of antinatalism. So I have a playlist of videos called Anti-Antinatalism. So you can talk about that. Be very suspicious of solutions to problems that rely on subtraction rather than addition. I have known many people who said that the way to improve Africa was to depopulate it. And it's always Africa, it seems. There's a lot of latent and implicit racism. And, back in the 1990s, there was the boom of HIV/AIDS in Africa. You hear all the time white people, middle class or wealthy white people, saying how happy they were that supposedly the population would decrease in Africa. And all that those people knew about Africa was what they saw on the TV news. They saw fundraisers for starvation in Ethiopia and so on. And by the way, Ethiopia is a wonderful country. It really is. It's the most misrepresented country on earth. You could have a great life in Ethiopia. You could have a great vacation there. Ethiopia has a lot going for it. It has an ancient continuous culture going back thousands of years that isn't built on genocide and so on. They really have a lot of advantages as a country. And by the way, ancient language and very interesting language, so on and so forth, and literature and music and everything else. Anyway, Ethiopia actually has a lot of advantages. Starting, you can read about it in Herodotus. Read about a great place, Ethiopia is. But whatever you think the problem with Africa is, and Africa has problems, why do you think the solution, why do you presume, would be subtraction? Because obviously, in a very shallow and insincere level, you can argue that any problem would be solved if human beings didn't exist to endure it, to perceive it, to experience it. And I think many people are too stupid to really recognize how fundamentally wrong their reasoning is. Now, I'll give you another example that touches me directly that I still deal with all the time sometimes. When you talk to people about First Nations languages, First Nations genocide, the disappearance of Cree, Ojibwe, Inuit, and Inuktitut, right? Many people will say to you, white people, middle-class people, but frankly, black people too, black Americans, black Canadians too, or something. They will say it would be better if that just didn't exist, if those people didn't exist, and they don't realize how close to Adolf Hitler they are really coming in their views. So how do we live with problems? How do we solve or overcome problems? When it is in this sense subtraction that people are talking about. Hey guys, do you want a cure for tooth decay? We could pull out everybody's teeth. We could have a country where everyone is wearing dentures, where there are no teeth in the whole country, where at birth you eliminate people's teeth so the teeth never even grow in the first place. Think about the savings. No more wisdom teeth removal, no more dentists. Everyone in the country is literally toothless. Just pull out all the teeth coast to coast for millions of people, billions of people, and everyone can just wear dentures their whole lives. Tooth decay is a problem. The cost of dentistry is a problem, right? The cost of taking care of elderly people in hospitals is a problem. Do you want to eliminate all the elderly people? To me, it's obviously outrageously stupid. But what it is that's so stupid about it is not obvious. Now, Melissa, do you want to exercise your privilege as our prime audience member? Do you want to offer a question or? Right. Right. So the one top. Well, if you want to, you can reply to some of these questions I got from the audience. But the topic here is dealing with tragedy and dealing with heartbreak from a nihilistic perspective. And I'd say I haven't even gone into that yet. But obviously, I could now add on a whole extra hour-long monologue about the fact that the way most people in Christian culture, in Jewish culture, in Muslim culture, the way most people respond to tragedy is to say, believe, 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 right? And also, another really sick and twisted thing in religions that's broader than the Judeo-Christian, in Christianity, but also in Hinduism and Buddhism, right? Believe, believe, believe. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. But the way to deal with sorrow is to be self-sacrificing, right? To be repentant. Some of these things. You want to go on?
Yeah. I wasn't intending to be on camera, so I'm sorry if I look a mess. So I can relate to what you're saying about the biggest tragedy in your life being the education system in multiple ways. But in one really in one way that was really close to me and took me a long time to fully understand the implications of it in my life and why I responded the way I did when I was 19 and 20, when I was going through it. So I had always thought of myself as like a perfect student, like I had a 4.0 in high school and I got into the school that I wanted to go to, the top school in my state. Just for me, that was part of just who I was. I was like, I'm somebody who does all of her classwork, all of her homework,
right,
and succeeds in school. If nothing else, like I'm going to be a good student, right? Why am I feel like I'm out of breath. But yeah, and it was just a complete shock to me when I failed one of my classes in university. Yep. I failed organic chemistry. And that same semester, I was taking a physics course and a neurobiology course. So these were difficult science classes for anybody to take, but it just, I didn't anticipate that I could actually fail a class. And it was like it's partly because of the grading system of that class. It was just terrible at my university. The only grades were like 3 exams. So I did okay on the first exam, but then I didn't do well on the second. I didn't do well on the third, and then I failed. I failed the whole class. And I got put on academic probation because I did poorly in the other classes too. And it just like totally shifted what my identity was. Because, at that time I was like, I'm a good student.
Yeah.
This is proving that I'm not a good student, or there's something I've failed, and I just couldn't handle it. And only like years later have I like understood the impact of that in my life and how that impacted what I chose to do.
This would be 18 or 19 or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was 18 and 19 at that time. So yeah, I was just like, at that time I was planning to I was hoping to go to medical school. Like I was planning to be a professional in some sense in the medical field. And then, I was planning to major in biology.
But this is about the coping. I'm sorry, but I don't want to go with the career side of it. What?
Yeah, I failed. I just couldn't cope with it. I didn't. So like I switched. Okay. I know.
No, it's fine.
I know
it's about dealing with
but I'm just saying, like I switched to something that I knew I could do. I knew I could get a degree in English. Like I knew, like for me that would be it. So I chose the easy route, and like if I ever felt bad about it, like the person that I was involved with at the time would say like, you're stressed out, you should smoke weed. You're stressed out, you should get drunk with me. And
that's where I thought this might be going. Yeah, there was marijuana, alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watching TV shows on DVD.
Yeah,
it
was a total exactly what you
this
talked
kind of
about.
distraction and self-indulgence, trying to feel good through irrelevant
exactly
things.
what I was saying earlier in this live stream. What generally in our culture, what is used as a coping strategy is what I did. And it obviously didn't work for me. And of course not. It's not going to solve the problem. No, it didn't solve the problem. Right. So yeah, I just personally, I really do appreciate what you've, basically your strategy here is to have something so meaningful in your life that, whatever it is that's upsetting you, whatever tragedy that you're going through at the time, it seems small in comparison to the bigger things.
And if you don't have something that meaningful, you got to go out and get it. I would just say, this kind of thing. So sorry, I'm not trivializing what Melissa went through. It's just that I don't want to get to the details of an education in organic chemistry, because that's not what this video is about. My father wanted to be a baseball player. There are all these myths built up about who my father was, and it really pisses me off. That tells you a lot about who he was. He wanted to be an athlete. Now, one of the reasons I think he liked baseball was that he didn't really have to exercise. He was not athletic. It's one of the ways you kind of stand there. You can look like Babe Ruth and be a baseball player. You couldn't in those days. And my father, Barry, he always said he would have been happy in life. He would have never gone to university. He would have never had any other problems if he could have just played the lowest level of local baseball. So not national, not talking about being a star on a huge scale. But he said if he could have played sandlot baseball, if he could have played AAA baseball, if he could have played low-level, crappy baseball, he would have devoted his life to that and never looked back. He wanted to be a baseball player. Now, what percentage of teenagers who have that dream are disappointed? 95, 99, it ended in failure. And not most things in life are not like that. So we just had someone saying they're going to learn Russian in the next 2 years. What percentage of people who try to learn Russian in 2 years are disappointed? Like some, but it's not a 99% failure rate, right? You can do it. You want to be a pro baseball player, but then what did my father do? Right? He threw himself into acting. What percentage of actors fail? Right? That inevitably led to disappointment also for him. Okay, if not inevitably, and it was on my mind before making this video. I know a middle-aged woman who wanted to be an actress, and it shaped her whole life. From, I assume from childhood, but at least from her teenage years, what she did in college and what she did thereafter and so on, right? She was trying to be an actress. Okay, what percentage of aspiring actors fail? No, I'm just being real with you. My father was not a tremendously handsome man. I would describe him as plain in his youth. Well, not ugly, but certainly plain. When he walked into the room, no one gasped and said, "Who is that?" No one said, "That's a guy with movie star quality." I've met quite a few movie stars. It's not that meaningful to me, but I'll always remember Sigourney Weaver. She wasn't presented as beautiful in her films. She wasn't made into that guy. Let me tell you, if you met Sigourney Weaver back in the day, if you met her face, she was a really beautiful woman. She was a very striking woman, very commanding presence. Woo! And if you didn't know who she was, when Sigourney Weaver walked into the room, who is that? Wow. And she wasn't even considered a beautiful actress, like compared to the women who were really on the cover of Vogue magazine or whatever. She wasn't presented as a beauty icon for her generation. She wasn't a sex symbol, as we say. So my father was plain. This young woman I'm thinking of, she is also plain. Not ugly, but she's not beautiful. She's not going to stand out. She's not going to have that going for her. And this is the problem. Okay. Even if you say you're prepared for that failure, like even if you say, okay, you're going to go into Little League Baseball, you're going to go to the baseball, you're going to start getting into the tryouts and then what have you, and you say 99% of people fail, right? Do you have something more meaningful in your life right now when the failure comes? Like, do you already have it? Or are you going to do what Melissa described? Are you going to start smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, and watching The Family Guy? Yeah, playing video games, watching The Family Guy on DVD or something, watching some comedy. Like, what? Okay, you can say that you're prepared for failure, right? But I'm suggesting the only way to prepare for failure is actually to have something so meaningful in your life, something so enormous that this disappointment seems small by comparison. And, again, I'm not saying this to denigrate either person. I think my father never got over it, and I think this middle-aged woman I'm thinking of, I think she never got over it. She never will get over it. And she doesn't know any other way to be happy, she doesn't have some other source of meaning in her life. So when that one fails, and again, it's kind of like what I said about the failure of university education. It doesn't just fail once. It fails again and again and again. You go to another audition. You go to another, right? Yeah. That's the kind of tragedy you got to live with. So yeah, So a lot of intelligent and sympathetic comments here. Generation X Gamer says, quote, "A goal-driven life is always more productive and fulfilling. There will be mountains of problems in research field trips." Yeah. It's a little bit like YouTube, though, right? I think that most people have a lot of difficulty being honest with themselves about what their hopes are, what their desires are, what their expectations are. And then they have difficulty dealing with the disappointment, dealing with, if that doesn't happen. Because, sorry, you've just said it's great. You've just said having a goal-filled life is fulfilling, and your example is research. I've known so many people who have PhDs and a career in research, and they're suicidal. They're totally miserable, totally hopeless. And I know why. I'll just be real with you. I know why. They don't know why. I think those are people who really were not honest with themselves about what they wanted, what they were enrolling in that PhD program for in the first place. Someone says they were fascinated with Ethiopia as a child and ask if I've ever been to Ethiopia. No, I've never been to Ethiopia. Wasn't my field, was my area of research. But yeah, Ethiopia is fascinating. So totally fine question. Someone asked, did you ever try to get back into learning Cree? again and again. Sure, even during the time I've been with Melissa, she's seen me emailing and phoning up universities that had programs for First Nations languages or something like that. She's seen me looking into programs. So for many years, again, I tried to get back into Cree, and both in Canada and in the United States. There's one program that exists on paper in France, but I don't think it exists in the real world. But yeah, I really made a survey of ways to get back in that field for many years. We got a question asking, Melissa, what is your biggest tragedy in life? How did you cope with it? But I think you've coincidentally, you've already answered the question. I don't know if you said that in before or after. Yeah. Okay, so coming back to the comment that started this all, I made this comment with completely good intentions, where what I'm saying is, you can study languages, you can study history, you can study politics, you can start doing something more meaningful than playing video games, both on and off YouTube. And then what you're doing on YouTube is going to reflect what you're doing off YouTube. And these tragedies, your sense of disappointment with your career as a video game YouTuber, it's going to seem like a minor footnote. Now, I'll just say two more things about this. One, this guy, the Retro Bro, he put a lot of work into his YouTube channel. To my knowledge, he completely renovated this basement into a studio. He had a level of commitment and work ethic for this. I've never known a single vegan who had that level of commitment and work ethic, not even the guys who are making millions of dollars out of it. It is remarkable how much he was committed to the dream. And I don't know if he'd be honest with himself about the dream. It's very easy for YouTubers to say they don't care about the size of their audience, they don't care about views, they don't care about the money, etc. But, probably he was hoping he would be the next PewDiePie, that he would be a big success, that this very considerable effort he put into building up the studio and probably building up his own collection of video games and effort going into that, probably he was hoping it would be rewarded with at least having a considerable audience, if not a certain level of fame, certain level of affluence, income, money that comes from that success. And again, part of coping with tragedy is being honest with yourself about what it is you wanted, what it is you can't have now that you wanted before, so on and so forth. Now, you get to choose what you want. You get to choose what it is you're willing to do to get it. And you may not realize that in making those choices, you are deciding who you are going to be 5 years from now. So early in this response, I said, look, you can change your life at any time. You can change who you are. And then your YouTube channel will reflect that. Your life won't change in 1 week. Who you are, it might not even change in 1 month or 1 year, right? If I learn Spanish and I move to Los Angeles and I'm speaking Spanish every day, maybe I'm making YouTube videos in Spanish or talking about learning Spanish. I'm starting to think about politics and talk to people about politics in Spanish and from a Latino perspective, or from a, my life will change. Who I am will change with something as simple as that. I'm using that example because it's obvious. It's going to change me. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And, I get it. Most people are making these choices, even at the best of times, just in terms of what will make them happy. And that's why it's so crushing for them. It's so tragic when the choices they've made don't make them happy anymore. But the challenge I'm putting to you is to instead make these choices about what is it you want and what is it you're willing to do to get it. Not in terms of what will make you happy, but what will make you a better man, what will make you a better woman, what will turn you into the person you want to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And when you're talking to a 15-year-old kid, they only know the difference between being 10 and being 15, right? They can't imagine, they can't visualize what kind of person they could be at age 40, not unless you help them. right? And I've known kids who grew up on an Indian reservation, a First Nations reservation, whatever you want to say this, Sorry, that's the term still used as Indian reservation. They have grown up on an Indian reservation where they don't have positive role models of what a 40-year-old man is like. I've said this before. When I grew up, I knew my parents were weird. I knew they were abnormal. But who it was I could look to as examples of normalcy, what it was to be a middle-aged person, to have a career and be accomplished, they were pretty weird too, right? So, you can grow up in a neighborhood where you don't have positive examples in front of you. You can grow up on a reservation where you don't have that in front of you. And of course, even if you do have those examples in front of you, right, you may not be able to understand them. And those people may not explain to you, this is this is the path in life that they're on. And these are the steps you'd have to take to be on a path like that, so on and so forth. So that's the challenge. And yeah, it's a challenge for everyone at 15. But for a lot of us, it's still a challenge at age 20. It's still a challenge at age 25. Still a challenge at age 30. People who play video games want to imagine that they're learning how to be James Bond by holding a controller and pressing the buttons and manipulating a little three-dimensional puppet that represents James Bond, right? And on some level, when you watch a movie, you may also think you're kind of participating in or practicing that these talents, these instincts, and so on, that you are in your way living the life of James Bond, so on and so forth by watching the movie. And you're not. You're not training yourself to be a hero. You're not training yourself to be a spy. You're not training yourself to be a sophisticated, intelligent, well-informed, worldly person, which is part of what James Bond represents. He's one of the few symbols of erudition and sophistication. James Bond doesn't drink beer. He has a martini extra dry, shaken, not stirred, right? James Bond wears a three-piece suit. For many men, the way they dress, head to toe, from their necktie to their shoes, is influenced by James Bond. And the makers of those films know that. They have a wardrobe department. It's really linked to those things. He is an image of sophistication and so on in a way that Spider-Man is not. It's a different kind of cultural symbol, okay? When you get up off that couch, whether it's playing the video game or watching the movie of James Bond, all right? No, you haven't been learning to live like James Bond, how to become a better person or become more like James Bond. You have been training yourself to become a couch potato. What you're doing is fundamentally passive, not active. And here's the greatest tragedy of all. If you enroll in a university program and you sit down in that little desk, the chair with what you're doing is much more similar to watching a movie, to watching a TV show than you want to think it is. What you're doing at university too, it's a lot in common with a video game. When you're preparing for and filling out that test, that in fact, most of the models for self-improvement we have in our society are much closer to passive forms of entertainment than really active forms of self-improvement. Things that involve your initiative, your innovation, your imagination. Things that would lead you to walk in the footsteps of your idols, your heroes, to become a heroic figure yourself.